Guys, we're back with the Screen Team right here on KWOC. This first half hour, we're taking care of Steve Jobs films, and the last one we're going to do is the movie called Steve Jobs. It was released last November in 2015. The movie was directed by Danny Boyle. It was written by Aaron Sorkin, and it stars Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs. And Anthony, I got to say, out of all the Steve Jobs films we saw today, or we've seen for this particular show, this one was definitely my favorite. From the very start, this movie has you sucked in. Did you feel the same way?
I did. I very much agree. And I think the film is a lot riskier than the other films in that it attempts to take a person's character and put them in 3 scenes only and try to distill the psychology of the character with all of the other surrounding characters only in those 3 scenes, and takes a fair amount of license in terms of the conversations that are had and the speeches and things of that nature, just to get them all in the same room. But what results out of that, to me, is maybe the most true story about the different people in Jobs' life, their motivations, and what Jobs was like as a person, and the price he paid for being such an aggressive and innovative person throughout his career.
There's a lot of points I want to hit on with this particular movie, but let's start off with Kate Winslet's character. She plays Joanna Hoffman, and the movie shows their relationship with these 3 particular events. And the events that they show in this movie are kind of like key Apple timeline things. There's a key presentation around the 1984 era. There's also a key presentation, I think, in the late 80s or early 90s, I can't remember, and then there's one, I think, in the early 2000s. So it kind of shows kind of 3 different decades, if you will. But it also shows this relationship between Steve Jobs and Joanna Hoffman, and it shows how deep this relationship is. And I was kind of surprised that the other 2 movies didn't hit on this particular relationship, that these 2 seem so close in the movie that the other movies didn't talk about it. Did that surprise you?
Well, I guess I'll just look at it from this way. I don't know if Joanna was this confessional character in his actual life. I don't know that.
Yeah.
But I think for the purposes of the story, the writer had to select someone that Jobs can communicate his innermost thoughts to the entire movie.
Right.
So he had to line someone up, like a Watson, if you will, like a Sherlock Holmes thing, so that there could be some dialogue, so you could understand Jobs' internal monologue the entire time. And that's the function that the character serves. And I guess it's my understanding that she was closely aligned with him in the early part of his career, but whether they were that close their whole life, I mean, who knows? I think the character, though, as a character, is really great for the movie.
And I thought their chemistry was perfect. I thought Fassbender and Kate Winslet's chemistry with those 2 characters. I mean, you felt like you were a fly on a wall watching the real characters doing their thing, and I thought they did a fantastic job. One of the things I really liked about this movie too was the pacing. There's really not a lot of downtime in this film. I mean, you're going from one conference to another, and then the movie's over, and you're like, wow. It didn't seem like with Steve Jobs, there's a lot of, with the previous movie we saw, Jobs, there's a lot of downtime and where they're doing LSD shots and stuff like that. And with this one, it just seemed like, boom, 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 movie's done. And I just thought from the very, very start, I was on the edge of the seat. Did you feel that way from the start to the finish of this movie?
I did. And there's a lot of things in play there. I think, number one, it's an Aaron Sorkin script. So, I mean, it's going to be pop, pop, pop the whole time. The dialogue's going to be witty. It's going to be fast. And I'll say this is a funnier movie than I, Steve. I mean, I'll just say it right now. I mean, some of Steve Jobs' lines in this movie are laugh out loud hilarious. I mean, the guy's a jerk, but he's a funny jerk, okay?
Right.
And it was a lot of fun to watch. I think also the feel of the movie matches the picture of Jobs as kind of a corporate hawk. I mean, in this movie, he's definitely micro-focused on the success of his product. He uses Bob Dylan and these other liberal icons as marketing techniques. But he is interested in one thing and one thing alone, and that is getting to the top of his product. Whereas in the other film, he is more of a hippie and more of, I would say, more lauded as some kind of true free spirit archetype, which is not the case in this movie at all.
One of the things that really surprised me about this film was the fact that they focused a lot on the father-daughter relationship between Steve Jobs and his daughter, Lisa Brennan. I mean, you see it from the very beginning when Lisa is like 5 years old, and the next time you see her when she's 9 or 10 years old, and then you see her where she's a young adult, and they're still having, the same issues that they've had when she was 5. And I was really surprised that, this story was about not only a genius marketer, salesperson, tech guy, but this was also a story about a fallen father who tried to somewhat pick up the pieces and try to maintain somewhat of a healthy relationship, even though he failed a lot. But he still tried with his daughter, and I found that to be a very interesting aspect. What did you think about the father-daughter relationship?
Well, I mean, it really makes the movie. I mean, that's what gives Jobs a soul in this movie and makes him interesting to the audience, because otherwise he's just a huge jerk, right? Who made some great products, okay? But I think in real life, it's my understanding, he patched things up with his daughter a lot sooner. And not that there weren't additional issues that are exploited by the writer for the purposes of the film later in life. I think maybe he did miss a semester paying for college or something like that. But I think what is true about the movie is that Jobs is a person that over time had to evolve, just like everybody does. And there's only one way that can be explored in a movie, and that allows for some fictional license to be able to tell that story. And I know there are people who were upset about how he was portrayed in this film because it really plays with the timing of events and who is involved and who says what. But if they remain spiritually true and Jobs ended up being a better person for it in his real life, I think the movie serves Jobs very well.
Did you have any favorite scenes from this movie?
Well, I think the middle part is my favorite, and I know, and mostly because it's the part where he's at his lowest point, okay, and he just does not care. He is just he tells Wozniak basically, "Hey, you're a really great musician in my orchestra," and he makes this perfect cube, and then he says, "Yeah, well, when we develop an operating system for it, it'll be ready." And the guy's like, "What are you talking?" I mean, there are just some great irreverent scenes where he really is at his richest when he has the most to lose, or maybe the least to lose, actually, because he in the movie it shows that he's calculated to take over Apple. Now, it's my understanding that wasn't necessarily true, but that's the way the movie's written, and it just kind of shows the maestro in his essence. And I just found that whole sequence to be very interesting.
One of my favorite scenes.
What about you? Did you have a favorite scene?
Yeah, my favorite scene, and I think that really had to do with maybe the acting or anything like that, but it was definitely the cinematography of the shots with Danny Boyle, and I'm not sure who the cinematographer was, but it's the scene where basically Steve Jobs gets fired from John Scully. Basically, the board chooses Scully, and they decide to fire Jobs or whatever, and it was shot like with a downpour of rain, and I mean, the cinematography of that particular scene was, I thought it was beautiful, and it really kind of spoke with those two characters, and I was just like, man, that's just gorgeous. So yeah, that was definitely the scene that I was like, wow, this movie is really, really good.
It's a great scene, and apparently I've read that scene actually does the most justice for Scully, and that Aaron Sorkin did attempt to speak with Scully's family or estate or whoever to get Scully right in terms of his feelings about how all that went down. Mm-hmm. So unlike other movies where Scully is portrayed as a complete out-of-control corporate villain, in this movie he's a lot more sympathetic. And even though that conversation never happened, it gives Scully his due in terms of his perspective on that Jobs was the one who was out of control and he had to keep the company going and right the ship. So all of that was very interesting, I thought.
Now, I want folks to listen very, very carefully to what I'm about to say. Leonardo DiCaprio, he did a fantastic job on the Revenant. He won the Oscar, was amazing in it. But Michael Fassbender was really, really close to being almost as good as that. I mean, Michael Fassbender was amazing in the movie Steve Jobs, and honestly, if he would have won the Oscar this year, I wouldn't have been heartbroken because I think he deserved it. I thought he was really good. Did you like Fassbender in this?
He's great, and I actually like Fassbender in almost everything I see him in. And I think he has an ability to disappear into the characters he plays. And I don't know how he does it because, let's face it, he doesn't look that much different in each movie.
Yeah.
So that's just a testament to him as an actor. He was great. I think that his ability to be a few different Steve Jobs in this movie is what's really interesting. Because even though he's the same kind of jerky character, the way he softens at the end and finally gives way to what's inside of him is really compelling. And I think it was a great performance.
All right, Anthony, I got to ask you one more question before we let you go. After seeing all these Apple movies, are you gonna buy any Apple products now? I know you're you're not an Apple guy, but are you gonna change your mind now?
It goes back to the conversation Wozniak and Jobs had in 1984, I guess, when Jobs decided to open up his system. I'll be a happy buyer of the first iPhone that rolls out the door with it.
Just thank the Apple II team.
That's right. I'm still waiting for that. No, I'm kidding. The bottom line is the products are closed. It's a closed system. And that's fine for a lot of people. I like to be able to, as Wozniak said, jack it up. So that's why I don't buy Apple products.
Beautiful stuff, Anthony. Dude, thank you so much for being on the show. This is very educational, but also these movies were, well, the last movie was really good.
Well, right, and I really appreciate the opportunity. And I'll see you down the road, man.
All right, sounds good. We'll be back with the Screen Team. We'll have Kadam on the show, and we'll do the animated feature Home that is coming your way next right here on KWOC.